had the longest tenure here.
I'll second that.
Do you want me to go ahead with that? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Okay.
But we need to elect them. Just the pro tems?
Yeah, just a pro tem. And particularly for the recording, we can hear you pretty well in here, but the recordings, the YouTube stream is a little more sensitive, so if you can just be cognizant of speaking directly into your microphones tonight, that will be helpful for the record. And Commissioner Farrer, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. We welcome you all to this meeting this evening. This is the meeting and agenda of the Planning Commission for April 26th, 2022. We're meeting at 6 p.m. this evening. We have an agenda, and that needs approval. Have all of you had an opportunity to look at the agenda,
The consent agenda, you mean?
the consent agenda?
Yes.
And do I hear a motion?
I have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Okay,
before we
go ahead.
on it. I took a drive around just looking at the places. I'm the new guy around here, so. The one question, well, probably two questions. One is the one that's over there on the highway by 8th. When I drove past that, I mean, will it be set back far enough that we feel comfortable that there won't be traffic issues, people stopping in the middle of the 50-mile-an-hour road? Have the engineers already been through all that?
First, with the consent agenda, we would you would just indicate which item you'd like to discuss further,
All right.
and then that would be taken off the consent agenda and placed on the administrative agenda.
Well, then I'll hold off on that one. That was
Well, before we get to the specific questions, so would you like to? You have some questions on item?
well. I'm more interested in item number 3.
Okay.
And I've heard that there's, some feedback we've received from the community on item number 3.
So
And I'd like to hear more about that.
1 and 3, or just 3?
I can live with 1. I mean, as
Okay.
long as the engineers have been through it, I can live with number 1.
Josh, is this something we take up right now, or do we just approve the agenda to begin?
You would approve the consent agenda minus any items that are taken off. And then what I would recommend, I'm probably going to be inserting myself more than usual tonight. I apologize. Because we have this legislative session, there's a public hearing that's a joint meeting between yourselves and the Parks, Arts, and Recreation Board. We'll recess and go to the multipurpose room and reconvene over there. Their consultant is probably going to be here about 6:40. So if we could move the administrative session ahead for those people that are here, and so essentially as soon as you're done approving the remaining items on the consent agenda, we could move the administrative session and those items that were pulled off the consent agenda there, so that we can address those prior to the dismissing to go to the other meeting.
So for item number 3, what would we, I mean, if we are interested in additional discussion, would we do that this evening?
Yes, it just gets placed immediately
Into the
by
administrative
on the
session?
administrative
Okay,
session,
great.
correct.
Commissioner Nelson has recommended that we put item 3 then on the administrative session, and we'll do that. Other than that, do we have a recommendation to approve the consent agenda?
Yeah, I motion that we approve the agenda with the change that's been noted.
Okay, all in favor?
I second it.
Okay. We have some minutes.
It'll be seconded now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry. We have some minutes that need to be approved, the minutes of March 22nd, 2022. We assume that all of you have had an opportunity to make corrections. If not, we can do that at this time. Otherwise, I'd like to hear a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
I believe the first motion, or the first action was the approval of the agenda overall.
That's what I said, and somebody said, you mean the consent agenda, and
That was me.
yeah.
So now you would move to the consent agenda, and just as a reminder, the consent agenda does not require a motion to approve. In this little blurb above it, we basically just make a call for objection, and if there's any opposition or comment, that item will be placed on the administrative session, and then if there are no other objections or comments, then the items pass without further consideration. So if you'd want, just start with a call for any objections on that.
Okay, are there any objections on the other items of the consent agenda?
Outside of the one already noted?
Right, outside,
Just to keep things in order, if you'd note that again.
Yeah.
outside of,
I'd like to have further discussions on item number 3.
okay. We'll move that to the administrative session then, and the other 4 items, any other questions there? If not, we'll ask for an approval of the consent agenda items.
I move to approve all of the consent items with the exception of item number 3, which we've moved to the administrative session.
Is there a second?
Did I misunderstand what you said? We don't need to approve the consent
Okay.
agenda. We just
All right.
need to approve the overall agenda.
Yes, and the consent agenda passes
It passes.
by lack of objection,
So we just need to make a motion to approve the agenda.
which you've already
So
done.
Which we've done. So we can move on now to the legislative session concerning item number 3.
The administrative session.
We're going to skip the legislative session and go into a combined meeting with the Parks and Recreation.
That is the part of the legislative session. I would recommend, at your discretion, of course, moving the administrative session ahead of the legislative session, because we can't really get to the legislative session till 6:40 probably.
Okay,
And so if we can take care of this item for those people that are interested from the public, then they're not going to have to wait through what may be an hour and a half presentation on the parks.
so we'll move to the administrative session and consider item 3 that was moved to that position. Commissioner Nelson, do you want to?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Laura, do you have
Yeah, I was
some explanation on that?
a little prepared for this one.
Okay,
So this, item number 3 is for a 19 single-family unit development in the area of 600 East, 400 North. It falls within the R18 single-family residential zone, which is a minimum 8,000 square foot lot requirement. This is the layout of the development in conjunction with that, just so you can see where that's at. So New Street will stub into 600 East, and then there's the stub onto 400 North. Pretty straightforward. All the lots meet the minimum zoning requirements. They are providing an access to the lot to the east, which they requested, which is fine. But other than that, it's pretty much the standard development that meets all the zoning requirements, which
Okay.
staff recommends approval.
Okay. And has there been some concern from the public on this?
I've heard there has, but I haven't heard what the concerns are exactly, so.
I see some nods in the,
I could address some of those items. I've been interacting with that more directly than Laura has.
Okay.
And then you're free to take some public comment if you'd like. This is not a public hearing. Public comment is not, a hearing is not required. It's an administrative item, but if you, at the chair's discretion, you can take some public comment. And I can comment before or after if you choose to do that.
I'd be curious if there are any real grounds, because it sounds like it meets our zoning and everything's appropriate, but I'd love to hear what the public has to say about it if there's something.
Yeah, would
that
you?
have.
Yeah, I could. You want me to dig into that just quickly?
Sure.
Okay.
We'll open it to a public hearing? No?
So you could take, it wouldn't be a public hearing,
Okay,
but you
just-
could take public comment. Would you like me to address the comments or the discussions I've had prior to that or following that?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. The first issue I'll list is there's been a concern among neighbors that the current zoning of the property is not accurate, that the property was never zoned to the R1 8000 zone. That's based off a couple different things. One is one of the citizens has viewed the parcel on the county assessor site, and the designation of the property under the subdivision heading where it tells you what subdivision in currently reads not a subdivision parcel, because it's not a subdivision parcel. It's just 3 meets and bounds parcels that have not yet been subdivided. That's why we're here. That it doesn't have any bearing or indication as to whether it could be subdivided or not, or what its zoning is. The county does not track or maintain a database of our zoning.
Just to clarify for me on that, I mean, basically any piece of property out there that someone, that was undeveloped, that was just sitting there, would be the same.
Would say not a subdivision parcel.
So where
correct.
my house is,
Before it was
developed,
subdivided,
it was- So
And most
so
of
it's just
Plat,
like every other piece.
right, and most of Plat A actually will say not a subdivision parcel because it's just part of Lot 1, Block 5, Plat A.
Okay.
It's based on a legal description.
Okay,
We have not located what we believe to be the original rezone ordinance for this property. The property surrounding it was rezoned by Clark Palferman in 1992, but we actually had Jeff Anderson, our city engineer, map the legal description of that rezone, and it actually traced all the way around this property, but did not include this property. So we have not located the original ordinance doing the rezoning, but we do have our most recent official map. That's our official zoning map that was adopted in 2014 after a public hearing before the city council, and that map clearly designates this parcel as R18.
Okay.
So independent of any previous action, the council took action after a duly noticed public hearing in 2014, and that zoning is effective.
okay.
So as of 2014, that zoning was effective.
At the latest date. It was effective far before that. Laura has indicated that it's been zoned that longer than she's been here, so we're 25 years plus back, which is why it's hard for us to find it, because it's all manual. It's Kim going to the basement
Understood.
at that time. So that we do have,
Regardless, 2014 Trump.
regardless, 2014 trumps everything. That is an official map. It has the signature of the mayor and the community development director on it. The next is that there is believed to have been wetlands identified previously on the property. One of the citizens did provide us a public notice of an intent to fill wetlands. I believe that was from the late 90s. So there's some indication that the Corps did at one time believe there was wetlands delineated on the site. The applicant, or actually the property owner, or the person that brokered the deal, hired a wetlands consultant to do a wetlands delineation study on the property, and their findings was that there were no wetlands on the property, that the ditch may be jurisdictional because it may convey waters of Spring Creek, but they submitted that to the Army Corps of Engineers. The regional Army Corps of Engineer representative provided us with a letter in response saying that they concurred with the findings of the wetlands report, that there was no wetlands on the property. There is a reason for that perception. There is a depression that was graded into the property kind of in the northeastern part of the property to catch stormwater that was initially intended to be caught off of the subdivision to the east in the parcel immediately to the east. That person worked with the owner of that property, worked with Mr. Palferman, and that stormwater has been being caught there. That stormwater will now be caught and discharged into the stormwater system by constructing a new main all the way up to the Mill Pond Basin by Spring Acres. no, not Spring Acres, that's by Spring Creek Park on 4th East and 6th North. So there has been water collecting there in what looks kind of like a pond, but it's been determined not to be a jurisdictional wetland. The remaining item is that concerns over the impact of developing this on groundwater and on stormwater, surface waters. Working through the Development Review Committee process, Public Works expressed to the developer that there was supposed to be a basin constructed on the parcel to the east to catch 4 lots worth of runoff from that eastern subdivision. And that as part of this work, especially because they're going about 8 feet into that, taking about 8 feet of that adjacent property and changing the boundary line, that they would need to, as part of their grading plan, they have to maintain a berm there as instructed or required on the previous plat to the east to protect those homes and homes further to the west from stormwater runoff. And that basin will need to be constructed and maintained on that property to the east. And Mr. Condi, the developer of this subdivision, has agreed through the development review process to grade that basin as required on the previous plat.
So that's been addressed with the DRC.
It's been addressed with the DRC.
And with the developer.
Correct. And so all those comments have been addressed, and but they were concerns and they were handled.
Great.
And the last, there may be others, but the last major one is that the access road onto the pay property to the east at the north knuckle there crosses through what is designated on that plat for the property to the east as an easement for stormwater. As a result of that, that road will have to be essentially inclined over that berm and maintain conveyance for that stormwater across to any future access road that's constructed there to maintain that planned stormwater structure.
And again, that's been addressed with DRC.
It has.
And as part of the red lines. And will be taken care of.
Correct.
Okay.
So
Sounds like you guys have done a great job addressing concerns. I don't know, Chair Pro Tem, if you're interested in opening for some comment, if there's maybe there's other issues that some of the public want to address, I don't know.
I think we ought to open it for public comment at this time, if someone would like to come forward. Would come up to the pulpit and would you state your name and address?
And I would mention just on the back end that we appreciate the diligence of the citizens, and they've been very considerate and understanding as we've tried to provide them information. We had a couple bits of confusion along the way and haven't provided all the information immediately just because we didn't read the request right, but we are working to
It sounds like you've done a great job addressing it.
share
too.
that with everyone.
I love that the citizens are engaged in this.
My name's Joanne Heaster. I live at 657 North, 650 East here in Springville. Is that all I need to say? Okay. I had started corresponding with the mayor starting the first part of February. And what I told him, he just referred me to Josh Yost. So I am going to read a letter that I just sent to him yesterday with some of the concerns. And I'm sorry that I'm reading it, but that's the way I'm able to convey my thoughts. On the 28th of March 2022, I requested through GRAMA all records concerning the property on 645 East, 400 North Springville. You denied me, stating the property had been zoned for residential development for many years. If that was correct, you could have provided me the information. You did not state when it was zoned and did not give me a reason why you denied me the copies. The city recorder stated if I wanted to appeal the decision, I would have to write to the city administrator. My request was sent to Mr. Fitzgerald on the 4th of April 2022 via mail. You left me a message on my answering machine on the 11th, and I returned your call on the 12th. My request was not a phone call, but paperwork concerning the property. you stated that you had to dig to find any paperwork concerning the zoning. I asked you to send me a copy, and you stated you would. I visited the Springville City offices on the 18th of April because I had not received a copy of the paperwork requested. You gave me a copy of minutes from a city council meeting in 1992. It states that a public hearing for the zone change was held on the 7th and the 21st of April, 1992. Yet, you cannot produce the minutes for that. I also requested copies of the most recent Army Corps of Engineering report, which you persisted that you were not sure I would be able to get a copy. And I questioned that you stated it had to be approved by the recorder. You then stated you would send me a copy. I had not received them. I had made another request in grammar. During my research, I found a copy of a public notice dating October 1st, 1997. It was from the Army Corps of Engineers concerning a proposed project to fill in the Little Creek and adjacent wetlands to build a subdivision on the very property that we are discussing. You also stated to me that you have not found any paperwork indicating that it was wetland. Since the subdivision was not built, I assume Mr. Pulverman, who is also a builder, was not given permission. I am working on getting the final report from the Corps of Engineers and any other reports that pertain to this property. I have attached the public notice. Even though Condi Construction is seeking preliminary approval for the Mill Pond Estates subdivision, truckloads of fill dirt has been dumped on that property. Trees have been bulldozed and a barn was removed. Condi Construction engineers have also stated that the lots have all been sold. I understand that developers can enter into a contract to sell a lot, but it can only be sold after the final subdivision plot has been approved with the Planning Commission and recorded with the county clerk. Another inconsistency I have found with an adjacent property in a map drawn by Northern Engineering in 2014. It indicated that the adjacent property shall receive stormwater runoff. It's on there's a big hill up there on a ridge. All that water is going to come down into that area. And a retention pond should have been put in place already. I would like to add that the access road that has been put in the plan is right where the retention pond should be. Why do they need an access road to begin with? I have also looked online for areas of flooding in Springville and came across flood risk overview for Springville. The article states that the horse pasture is a risk for flooding. This area is basically a large retention pond. Since the property has been considered wetlands in the past, and even though it doesn't look wet from the roadside, does not mean it has no purpose. The wetlands provide protection of other areas such as storage areas for storm and flood waters. To say that the owners adjacent to the property can sue the builder if something happens to their property after the subdivision has been put in place is not something you would expect from a professional who should be looking out for the welfare of the citizens of Springville. And then I said, due to the inconsistencies and basing your actions on the Springville committee meeting in 1992, which was never recorded at the county, I am requesting that you postpone the preliminary hearing for Condi Construction until these issues can be resolved. I am also requesting a public hearing so the public and those living adjacent to the property can voice their opinions. Mr. Yost wrote back to me. I won't go into that, but I do have a copy of both of these if you're interested in reading those.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Yost, Director Yost, do you want to comment on any of those issues? I know you've commented on.
Do you have any questions?
Issues you already talked about, right?
Yeah.
Have been addressed,
I think.
Including the water runoff.
Yes. the statement about fill being placed on the property and trees being grubbed, and they do have a land disturbance permit from our stormwater pollution prevention. Brent, our staff member for that, we confirmed that with him this morning.
Okay.
And they've placed all of the track out areas and everything that would be required to be in compliant with that permit.
And preliminary approval was not necessary requirement before they started.
No, not for the land disturbance permit, no.
Yeah, it sounds like most of these things, the wetland, the zoning, it's already been addressed.
Yeah, the confusion over the records was really that I focused, in the request, the first sentence asked for all records, all documents pertaining to the property, but then the last sentence said I was requesting all records of the public hearing for the rezone and the minutes and all of those things, and I focused on that, and the reply was, it hasn't happened, nor will that happen, so we don't have those records to provide. But yesterday we printed out copies of all the plats and the wetlands reports and have those available at the front desk. We can't give copies of those out because they're part of the proprietary information of the applicant, but they're welcome to come and review those at the city. And we communicated that.
So she could come to here now and get those, but we just can't give them out.
Yes, we can't give those out. And that's why all of our records requests go through Kim Crane. Wow, sorry. Our recorder, because she manages our compliance with the Government Records Access and Management Act to make sure we don't release anything that's privileged or proprietary.
Thanks.
And do all wetlands reports, that they're included in that, I guess, any kind of wetlands report?
Generally, those kind of documents that that they provide us, we can't, like a geotech report, we can't provide copies of those because they're the property of the applicant, but we can provide them for inspection at the city offices.
I assume she could also get the zoning map and that of 2014 and the
That was
minutes
sent,
that all went with.
That was sent last week, the minutes, the
Okay.
ordinance, and the map.
Excellent.
Correct.
Which again, that piece trumps everything else when it comes to zoning, because the
Correct.
city council passed it, right? Okay.
Yes. We're still looking for the original copy just for our records,
Sure.
but
But for all intents and purposes, it's really irrelevant at this point, right? Because the city council already voted that it would
Correct.
be zoned this way. Okay.
Okay, are there any other, yes, just gonna ask if there are any other citizens that would like to make a comment. If you could, give your name and address. and
Yes,
then-
my name is Fred Mertlick. I live adjacent to this proposed development,
And what is your address?
412 North, 600 East.
Okay.
I guess I'm here for several reasons. There was no public notice that this land was going to be developed. No sign in front, no notice that this was happening until the trucks and things began to go and we asked questions. I would urge, and I'm looking at the positive stuff, Josh, I would urge that we do it correctly whenever we're doing it. Whatever you have to do and whatever you have to okay that's been done by someone in the city offices. My concern, secondly, is for three little widows down there next to where the lowest part of this property is. And there is a pond there. It is flowing water, and there's a pair of ducks settling there now. If you'd care to go see the wetlands as it now stands in the driest part of 4 or 5 years, I suppose. I spoke with the engineer for Condi Construction, and he assured me that they would fill in that pond and take care of the water with, and Josh, you've mentioned the pipe that's gonna go down that road. the pipe will come down the road and take care of that little pond. There's also a pipe coming down from the hill that was unknown to this construction supervisor until I mentioned it to him, and he's found out that it's true, that it's water coming off the hill, not contained anywhere. And he assured me that he would try to make sure that that fit into his system. The system then goes, you mentioned, Josh, out and onto a road and onto a pond.
Out the north, the road that comes
The
onto
north
600
exit.
east, and
And
then
goes
up
on.
to 600 north, and then over to the Mill Pond Basin adjacent to 4th East.
Okay. I would urge for rightness' sake that you have Condi Construction pay for that and not come out of my tax money.
They are paying for it. It's a required off-site improvement for the project.
They didn't know it 10 days ago.
Well, if you were talking to someone on the site, they may not have been as up.
No, this was the site manager.
it-
So anyway,
okay.
please take care of that.
Mhm.
So we don't have our tax money doing something that Condi Construction is authorized to do. Please, gentlemen, as we looked as a group of people that live in that neighborhood at things that just didn't seem to fall as they ought to fall, please make sure they do so in the future. Please do that. We've got a lovely little town here, and I'd like it to say as good as we can make it. I'm old, and that's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Josh, is it required that there be if somebody's developing a piece of property and it falls within zoning, is it required they have a public hearing for something?
No, there's no legislative action. It's just administrative. I mean, we could.
We did
Uh,
it right.
Yeah, we followed all of our requirements. Again, kind of back to the Westfield Central study, is there something that we can institute more? So could we put signs out? Yeah, we could do that. The big question with that is just managing expectations, because on this there really isn't an opportunity for public hearing. But even if there's not an opportunity for a public hearing, it's always better for people to know what's happening before the trucks show up. So we could look into having even these by right subdivisions post some signage.
That'd be,
We're running
that would
out.
be-
We're running out of space in Springville, and so, more and more, I think it would be easy for us to at least communicate to the neighbors effectively.
we appreciate that feedback to help us in that regard. Thank you.
If there are no further comments from the public, are there any from the commissioners at this point? Any other comments that you have?
Just thank you to the public for the comments, and
Yes.
well thought out, and thank you to Josh and his team for following through on these things.
Now that this has been moved to an administrative action, it requires a motion.
Correct.
I'll entertain a motion from the commissioners.
What's that?
Well, we'd always love to have you around, but if you have something else to do,
Motion is to go forward.
go ahead.
Just make a
Yeah, all the discussion regarding this item's completed.
We grant approval.
I'll make a motion that we grant approval for the Mill Pond Estate subdivision located in the area of 650 East, 400 North in the R1 8 single-family residential zone.
I would just mention that it's preliminary approval.
Okay? I'll make a preliminary motion,
No,
a motion to approve preliminarily the Mill Pond Estate subdivision located in the area of 650 East, 400 North in the R1 8 single-family residential zone. Yeah, you circled it.
And I'll second that.
okay. Any opposed? in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Just for
Okay.
clarification for the citizens that are here, maybe explain a little bit about preliminary approval and where it goes from here so that they can understand a little bit better.
For the new guy up here, too.
So then the next step is they will make an official application to make for final approval. It will go through the same process that has gone to date through the Development Review Committee, and then back to you guys for a recommendation to City Council, who will then have the final approval.
Will that be on a legislative item as well?
Nope, it's administrative, so either
Administrative.
it meets the requirements of our city ordinances, or it doesn't, so if it doesn't, then it doesn't typically get this far.
Yeah.
And once again, the Development Review Committee is a committee based on all of our utility heads, the folks with that throughout the city, so the fire, safety, all of those things. So they look at all the plans, they review all of those, they redline any kinds of issues, they'll look at the water systems, the ponds, they'll look at all of that before it comes back to us for an additional approval. Okay.
I'm sorry, is there, tell me if I'm wrong. Mr. Conley is now over the properties with the builder. Is that within his right, or is he over?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
Yes.
within his right. He has a permit to do that. And he has a permit also to take the trees down. So he is just grubbing the property, preparing for the development of the piece once he gets final approval. He cannot begin any of the construction of the sewer lines, the water lines, anything of that nature until he has final approval. But he can go and grub the property and take the trees down and get it prepped for that approval. So at this stage, there is a preliminary approval that has been given. He has to come back to the city for final approval, and it has to go back through the process of the city. But the property is already zoned as an R18 property. So he is within the zoning of the city. So he has to go through the final process. It comes back to us as the planning commission for approval, and then on to the city council.
Okay, one last weird question. The county still has it labeled as farmland, worth $123,000 in taxes.
Right, but the county has nothing to do with any, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but then the county has nothing to do with what is inside the city's boundaries.
Yeah, the assessor site just tracks the use of the property, and when the subdivision is recorded in their next assessment cycle, they'll come back and reassess it as developed lots, and then as the houses get built, they will come back and add the valuation of the houses, and we won't actually see property tax revenue from that probably until fiscal 24. So that lags. The county assessor, it may be a while before they update that assessment information.
Josh, if the one citizen doesn't get additional information that she needs, she's welcome to come again when we meet on this item?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, calling, emailing, coming to the office to talk with us will provide better information. So we can't always respond to questions well or dig up information in a meeting.
Right.
And they're
We need to go to the legislative session now, is that correct?
yes.
Will they be coming here?
No, we're going there, so I would recommend recessing, calling for a motion to recess this meeting to reconvene in the multipurpose room for a joint meeting with the PAR board.
Okay.
So I propose that we recess this meeting and reconvene. in the multipurpose room for the additional meeting.
Okay. I'll
Second.
second that. All in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
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 Good job, Josh.
Thanks for doing that. I think that was.
Well, I tried to do it correctly until Brett jumped in and then he had me confused.
I saw that turning lane.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for all that
you'll
follow-up.
quickly learn that items. They'll be recorded.
This was the right. Just got up. How to see you, my friend?
It's good to see you. Thank you. I wanted to stand up because I said about copyright.
It's okay. That's all right. Good job, Brian. Good to see you.
Thank you.
No, he's from Johnston. Ryan Johnston. He's one of the Johnston.
I wish that my area was as it was 25 years ago. People buy property and develop property. That's life.
I can't believe the house in the cul-de-sac right behind you,
Yeah.
the modern looking one.
Yeah,
You walk out their back door and they look right, it's Liz.
you have to adjust the knob.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
So you walk right out
That's where
looking
Kim
inside.
sits. Troy's
I mean,
normally.
there's no space there.
I know the husband's father. And I said, man, what are you gonna do when they tell the kids to go play in the backyard? He got mad at me. That's a very nice husband. Say, what is it?
Well, their patio,
They're gonna paint the
their
backyard.
patio and everything's out on the front.
Oh, it's crazy. Have you seen it?
It's amazing.
Let's get in there so we don't waste their
I'm
time.
ready to leave. Let's get her done. Get this thing over with and move on, right?
Yep.
Now, what did you do?
Tore my calf muscle.
How did you do that?
Oh, you don't want to hear about it.
Walking with Phil?
No, in fact, I walked with Phil about 7 miles that same day, and then I went down and worked on a vehicle and went to get up and started slipping on some sand that was on the cement, and I reached back with my left foot to brace me, and it popped.
I'll bet that hurt.
Yeah, it did.
So they have to reattach it?
They actually don't have to because it didn't it didn't tear all the way through. So what they'll do is just, they'll just send me to the physical therapist after I don't walk on it for about a month.
Oh, man, that's too bad.
wife and I wrestle.
I was sitting on an AC vent there, so I'm like,
Oh,
a lollipop.
by the way, when I brought this up earlier, it was just because I had heard there was some. I just wanted to make sure that you
Well, just
Here in Springville? Oh, you're.
no, in Spanish,
were around there.
but it's just there's just so much to do and figure out.
That would be the most awesome thing in the world. I should have bought it all then. That's right.
Is there combined families too? for tracking?
That was not the Cliff Notes version.
If I get this right, we will discuss items 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah.
Is that right, Josh?
Correct.
Should we make a motion to reconvene?
Sure. Or you could just say,
Or we
you
just-
can just do it.
Okay, good.
You're doing great, Mike, by the way.
Yeah,
Keep hanging in
I'm
there.
glad it's you.
We're,
Still being, are we on camera still as a live meeting?
Did you restart? Yes, you are back live.
okay, we're reconvening the meeting and agenda for the Planning Commission of April 26th, 2022. And we have 3 legislative items that we need to consider at this point. So we'll begin with item 7, Springville Building and Grounds Department requesting an amendment to Springville Code 116207 right-of-way park strip improvements for the purpose of street tree revisions. Josh, do you have?
David Ashton has asked me, it's just as we left that last meeting, that they're not quite prepared for that yet. So it asked me if the Planning Commission would entertain a continuance of that item.
We'll entertain a motion for a continuance.
I'll make a motion to continue item number 6 in the or item number 7 in the legislative session.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I
Okay, we'll move on then to item number 8, Springville City seeking an amendment to Springville City Code Section 116313, specific sign regulations.
On this one, I have asked myself to ask you if you would entertain a continuance, as we just finished up the final draft of that today.
Okay, can I ask what it's about?
Yeah, we're looking at amending 3 areas of the sign code. The first is related to A-frame signs that businesses put out in front of their businesses. The second is to establish a new category of sign called storefront projecting blade signs, which if you're ever on Center Street in Provo, you'll see a lot of those quaint signs like hung on a bracket. We don't have really a specific type for those, so we're creating a type for those and related regulations, and then we're making some amendments to the projecting, essentially like the big blade signs and marquees, like the theater sign or those type of signs, to allow for a little more flexibility and a little more area in those projecting big building signs.
Looking forward to that discussion. Yeah.
Okay, any other items in that
We
regard?
need to continue that one
Let's,
too.
the pro tem chair will entertain a motion to continue item number 8.
I move that we continue item number 8 on the legislative agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item number 9, Springville City seeking amendments to the Springville City Code, sections 11402, paren 2, paren 6, paren 7, and 14-2-104 to paren 2 to paren KK concerning wetlands report. Okay, Laura, you're up. up.
I'll note that among all of us, Ms. Thompson is the prepared one, so
Okay.
good for her. Thank you.
Writing
Laura.
four words to a sentence in this section. So this came about, there's need to be a little clarification with our wetland requirements in both our site plan approval process and our subdivision title processes. And to get them, basically, let me back up. There's confusion on whether we would accept a clearance letter from a wetland specialist versus the Army Corps of Engineers. Well, state law requires, states that a municipality may not designate or treat any land as wetlands unless the United States Army Corps of Engineers or other agency of the federal government has designated the land as wetlands. So this is just to kind of clarify that process, that will need that letter from the Army Corps if there are wetlands. If we suspect there's wetlands, then we'll accept a letter from a wetland specialist. I don't know how clear that was, but anyway, so that first amendment is to our site plan section, which is the 117404. And it just clarifies, adds that from a wetland specialist. And then the second one is in our subdivision title, and I won't read all the subparagraphs in that, but it just clarifies not if it's potential, if wetlands are located within those boundaries, then we'd get that letter from the Army Corps. And then to follow up, state legislatures also amending this year that we will have to report those areas that are wetlands to the Department of Just drew a
Isn't
blank.
it
It was on my, well, anyway, one of those
the State Geological Survey
survey department, anyway.
Agency? I can't remember the exact name, but
So it's just mainly a clarification. So if you have any questions.
So this is just basically that we need to get an Army Corps of Engineers letter specifying that it's wetlands.
Only in the preliminary plan.
If there are
Stage.
wetlands, then
If
we
there are
would
wetlands.
require those documents from the Army Corps of Engineers stating where those are and those delineations.
Okay.
So we're striking the words potential and on,
And, yeah,
and that's,
'cause we
and
can't
then,
speculate that, say, hey, we think there are, it has to be proven that there are by the Army Corps.
and then we're also striking a letter from the Army Corps of Engineers regarding any wetland areas.
That was just redundant.
Because it's in,
Sentence.
it's
Because
in,
it's already
Yeah, it's just,
KK1.
KK1,
exactly.
or I, whatever you want to call
It
it.
sells, yes.
okay.
So is it possible for a wetland specialist to be able to say there is no, or there are no wetlands in this particular piece of property,
Yes.
but yet there really is?
that's why the item we had earlier tonight, they sent that you send your report to the Army Corps, and the Army Corps
The wetland
concurs.
specialist will send it to the Army.
Yes.
Correct, yes.
And so what we have on that mill pond is that the wetland specialist company sent the report to the Corps, and the Corps concurred with the findings of the report.
But we're not requiring them to concur.
We're allowing them to get the specialist to determine, hey, yeah, there may be, so then you get the Army Corps involved. If you go straight to the Army Corps, then it can take
take
years.
a very, very long time, and we are essentially requiring a delineation before, which is a very extensive process. And now you can just go hire a consultant and then just get a letter of, get a response from the Corps instead of, hey, Corps, will you come look at this site? I'll
Is
talk
it-
to you in 3
again,
years.
Is it possible for there to be wetlands, but the specialist says there is not, and then the Army Corps comes back later?
And that's why we would have the letter from the specialist covering us and file.
Yeah, so
That's
the,
just what I wondered.
so the Corps will respond to that to that letter.
But I guess,
But if-
I guess,
Let me use
I guess
this as an
to,
example.
They're gonna be going.
to push this, to push this question farther, if this scenario that Kay described plays out and they've built 5 homes on that piece of property, and then suddenly they say, hey, wait a minute, this is wetlands, along comes your scenario, along comes the Army Corps of Engineers and say, so we say, here's the letter, then what? They,
Maybe that's a John
Well,
question, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's more, yes.
Let me ask
Hasn't
this
happened,
question. Let's
so I
use
can't-
this scenario that we had
I
tonight.
guess you're asking for a risk,
Let's
sorry.
use the scenario we had tonight, because I think with your scenario, the Army Corps would have come back already from the letter of recommendation from the specialist and said, these are not wetlands.
Yeah.
My question is if the Condi subdivision, we hires the specialist comes back, says there are no wetlands, goes to the Corps of Engineers, the Corps of Engineers then comes back and said, no, your specialist is wrong, these are wetlands, then that building permit dies right there and will not proceed unless they come back with additional information to the Army Corps of Engineers.
That's probably a John question, because it's, we don't have jurisdiction. So it's a very interesting jurisdictional question. We can't tell somebody that's a wetland, you can't build on it. Only the Corps can do
But
that.
the Corps wields a lot of power.
So the Corps could come back and stop them.
Yes.
We can't stop them.
But I would think that legally, if the specialist had said it's not wetlands, and they went ahead and applied, and the city gave them a permit and everything, and they build on it, if somebody then protests and goes to the Army Corps of Engineers, you simply say, well, there was a public hearing, you didn't show up and.
But we have to have the approval
Right.
of the Army Corps of Engineers before we can issue that permit.
If there's
Not
wetlands.
If there is
If there
wetlands,
is a
so,
question
there's
of
wetlands.
No,
so if they do a wetland report, Laura, and the specialist says there isn't any, do we always need that concurring letter back from the Corps?
No.
No.
That was what I was
Yeah.
wondering.
That's
So
my
that
thought.
goes,
and that's what I was saying.
okay, so, see that, okay. That's where we need, I guess, our city attorney to
Yeah.
answer that question.
So your
Sorry.
question is, if the consultant finds there are no wetlands, then we say, okay, we're done. We never go ask based on this ordinance, it doesn't look like we go ask the Corps, hey, do you agree? And
Right.
that's where the concern is.
Yeah,
So we don't have to ask the Corps whether there are wetlands or not then?
no.
But they could already be identified, obviously, and then
If
that's
they're
when we know.
identified and we know they exist, then we
Yes.
have to,
Yes. If
there's another
something's-
reporting that we have
That
to
we have to
do
do.
with the state, yes.
This is only property that might be in question that has not been identified.
So like tonight, as an example.
So the scenario I described, is that
You
a
have-
possibility?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's a scary one. I think it'd be worth talking to.
If,
I'll text John and tell him to come in here.
of which scenario, I'm sorry, which one?
That we rely on the consultant's word, and then later the Army Corps comes in and says, your consultant was wrong, and the bridge has
If you'd
already
like, I'll
been
go.
built.
If it
I'll walk
was-
in and ask John to come in. Do you
If
want
it
me to do
wasn't
that?
identified,
I
I guess
can.
the question is being asked is if it wasn't identified as a wetland. And,
I've never
But-
heard of the Army Corps coming in
Yeah,
and saying,
but this consultant says, no, these aren't wetlands.
right,
And then the Army Corps, and 5 homes are built, and the Army Corps comes back in and says, whoa, wait a minute, he was wrong.
see, and from what I understand, we could do
There's a
that right
pipe
now
that came
without the
down-
wetland specialist
There's a
at
pipe
all.
that came down from the mountain, there's a pipe that came down from the mountain, and it's flooding the property.
Well,
there's
and that's-
wetland,
and
there's
that-
2 ducks.
but what-
That would be that would be a very,
But what Laura's saying is right. I mean, if,
We can suspect there's wetlands. We're going that extra step to get the specialist, if we suspect, to give us a letter that we can put in our files.
okay.
Once they build, obviously the wetlands most likely will at that point disappear, right?
But we want to make sure that we protect the city.
Sometimes
so
not,
what we're
but
saying is.
we're
I-
protecting us.
I
As long
think
as
what
the
this is
city is
saying,
safe.
I think what this is saying is, if I understand this correctly, they're saying if the Army Corps has identified property as having wetlands, or it's a wetland property, then we've got to get the letter from them.
Well, right, and they'll mark that on the plat. There's more to it than that, but this was just a simple clarification. I guess it wasn't simple, or is it clarifying?
I think all that John is gonna tell us is if that occurs, what Brett was saying occurs, it's fairly simple process, and that is, if they go to the Army Corps of Engineers and they came back and said, yes, this should have been wetlands, then they have recourse against the city. I mean, that's that simple.
Do they, or do they have it against the
They have it
company?
against the,
I mean, how
Special-
culpable is the city in that
they have it
situation?
against the specialist. don't
Yeah.
they?
Probably not very, probably
This
not
is not
very,
a wetland.
I don't know.
especially if the consultant has said that it's not.
If I were like one specialist, I'm not sure I'd want to be making that kind of recommendation.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Explain impact fees.
Okay, yeah. If you wanna wait, we can pull it off and continue it with the other three
I think
items.
it's so simple that how everybody else feels like we're taking 4 words out of it.
I think after the fact, if you find out that we should have put something else in there, we can do it again, but I think we ought to go ahead and approve it.
Ron has reviewed these amendments and was great with them.
He
Yeah.
has.
Okay,
Are you guys uncomfortable with?
Nope, I'm okay.
I'm good.
okay, I'm good. So we'll open this to public hearing, and there being no public here, I'll make,
Move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, if there's no other,
We approve
yeah, go ahead and,
to amend Springville City Code Sections 11-7-402, parentheses 2, parentheses G, parentheses VII, and 14-2-104, parentheses 2, parentheses KK concerning wetlands reports.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you.
Just something to talk with John about.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, go.
All in favor?
Aye. Sorry we took so long to